Welcome back to my channel, Maria Kafetzis, luxury real estate broker with Douglas Solomon Real Estate, servicing both New York and Florida. And I'm here to speak to you today a little bit about buyer agency, selling agency. What is all these agencies? Do I need a selling agent? Do I need a listing agent? Do I need a buyer broker? And what is a transaction facilitator? Because there's so many terms flying around in the real estate world, and especially for sellers that haven't sold in a while or bought in a while, and buyers that maybe haven't bought or are buying and haven't bought in many years. They're confused about the process, and I get a lot of these questions all the time, like, do I need to have a separate buyer broker? I know you're the listing agent. Do I need another agent? It's really entirely up to you. So let's start in Florida. In Florida, pretty much everybody is a transaction facilitator. And what does that mean? That means that we just facilitate the transaction. So we do the paperwork, we provide information, tax information, contracts, disclosures, all sorts of things, just transaction facilitators. We're not supposed to be really giving consultations. Do most of us knowledgeable agents give our opinions and consultations on the homes that we're seeing and on the conditions of them? Absolutely, and of course. Why wouldn't we? And what would be our point if we weren't giving our knowledge and expertise to the buyer? So, transaction facilitator does not represent either the buyer nor the seller with any fiduciary responsibility, but we of course have ethical responsibility, and we have to perform in an ethical manner. We have to have full disclosure, whether it's with the seller or with the buyer. So the sellers and the buyers, of course, in Florida are fully protected because of these laws, and we have to perform in a honest and good faith manner. So you're pretty much protected, but you don't have to pick a side. There's no disclosure like in New York. In New York, we have to have a 2-page disclosure completed, even if we just make first initial contact with a buyer. And that is because there's a lot of people that, are kind of underhanded, and they misrepresent that they're representing that person, and really the representation is not with them, it's with the other party. So let's jump to New York, since that's the complicated one, and New York is the really the one that's going to take up most of this video. Florida is pretty simple. So in New York, we have either a seller's agent, which is usually a selling agent, or the seller's agent or a listing agent, the selling agent or the buyer's agent, and we have the broker's agent. So let's start with the listing. Let's say you're a homeowner listing your home. You have a listing agent. That agent has fiduciary responsibility to you as a seller's agent, and they represent you, which means they have to get the highest price possible for your home. They have to represent the home in the right way. They have to host open houses. They have to speak about the property. They have to take phone calls on the property. They have to text about the property. They have to market about the property. They have to do everything to the property in the best representation of you, the homeowner. Now, if your listing agent gets a buyer that comes directly inside the property at an open house or on a sign call or what have you, and that they have no relationship with, right? You're the listing broker, you're marketing this property, a buyer calls you, I have no relationship with that buyer, I have the relationship with my homeowner, my representation remains with the homeowner. If that buyer says, well, I love the home, I'd like to put in an offer, my representation still remains with the homeowner. I'm a seller's agent, but I have an ethical responsibility to this buyer. So it's not like I can hide things or lie about things or misconstrue things or trick them into anything, right? This is my ethical responsibility, is to be honest and perform in good faith to this buyer. So the buyer doesn't need an agent. Now, if that buyer feels that I'm being underhanded, or I'm telling him or her, hey, the house is listed at $800,000, but if you really want this deal, you got to give it to me for $810,000. That's underhanded, and that is illegal. You cannot counter over your asking price, right? That's part of law. So there are many reasons why buyers sometimes feel like they need a buyer's agent. But if you're working with an ethical, wonderful listing broker that knows everything about the property, that has direct contact with the buyer, with the seller, and you want to put in your offer directly through them, and you feel comfortable, and they have a track record, and they're experienced, and they're ethical people, go for it. You're probably better off than hiring somebody who knows nothing about the property and that hasn't worked with you. So that's sellers pretty much. Now, as a seller, if your agent has a buyer that they've been working with and they say, hey, I have a buyer in buyer brokerage and I think that this house will work out great for them, I want to bring them by, keep in mind that they do have a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility, which changes everything, because now they become a dual agent, right? Because they're actually representing both parties. They're not just representing one and giving proper ethics to that other party, but they're actually providing dual agency. And dual agency is a little risky because I believe an attorney can represent both parties, right? An attorney can represent a plaintiff and a defendant at the same time. It's just impossible. So you can provide dual agency and really truly represent both sides. So keep that in mind. Now, if there's no buyer brokerage agreement and I have a buyer that I know that is on the market, that's a totally different story. There's no dual agency there, right? So I have a buyer that I know of looking in this area. I'm going to bring them by and show them the house. Totally fine. There's no loss of representation there. So lastly, if you are a buyer and you have a cousin, a long lost cousin, and you walk into a listing broker and you love them and you want to bring them, your cousin into the transaction just so he or she can make a couple bucks because you feel bad for them, don't do that. That's terrible. That's, really, really an insult to our industry. And we beg you as an industry, please don't do that. We work very hard. We give up our weekends to be there at these open houses. We spend, between $500 and $1,000, per open house to market. And if we captured your attention and you walk directly to us without an agent, and now just because you feel bad for your long lost cousin who's an agent and has never closed a deal, taking that away from the listing broker who's doing absolutely everything to provide service is not right. So please consider that. And that's happened to me numerous times, and it's extremely frustrating because you don't want to turn away the buyer, but at the same time, it's just not right. It's like you being at work all week and a temp coming in and getting your paycheck for that week and just saying, I'm sorry, you're just going to get half because we feel bad for her. It's not right, and it's not the way we like to do business. So it does put a little a bad energy in the deal. So, but if you are a buyer and you have an agent that you have been working with and they've been sending you properties and you have been looking at properties and you have been going to appointments with and they can't make it to an open house, have your agent call the listing agent and let them know you're coming. This way, it's a courtesy thing between us in the industry, but if you walk into an open house, that listing agent is going to expect you to go through them to put in an offer. So it gets really messy and tangled up, but the best way to do it is know that if you want somebody to represent you as a buyer, you need to hire someone and let them work with you and stick to them, and hopefully they'll do a good job for you and you will find your dream home and you'll have full representation. If you're going to be going to listing agents directly, check them out and make sure that they're going to do the right thing by you, because sometimes it will not be in your benefit to go directly to the listing agent. A lot of listing agents, they're there to just make a paycheck and they just want the top dollar for their seller and they don't really care about you and your future business. So, you could get a little bit of both. But again, sticking to the topic here, the agency. In Florida, typically speaking, you have transactional facilitators. Now, we're all considered that unless you hire us specifically to be your seller's agent or specifically to be the buyer's agent. So here in Florida, you don't sign any disclosures. Here in New York, you do sign many disclosures, and we have to have you sign a disclosure at first initial contact. So, it is very important that you make up your mind of how you want to work. Now, if you start working with an agent and they're terrible and they're not bringing you properties and they're not taking you here and they're not, answering questions for you on certain properties that you might be seeing online, that's a problem, and it's time to move on and get yourself a better buyer agent. So this is where we are. If you have any questions on buyer brokerage, selling brokerage, listing brokerage, or transaction facilitators, please call me. I'm here to answer your questions. My telephone numbers are 516-885-2525 or 305-773-5994. You can email me at wrightrealtor, the number 4 and the letter U at gmail.com, and that's RIGHTREALTOR, the number 4, the letter U at gmail.com. And Right Realtor for You, spelled the same way. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com Right Realtor for You. I'm so into backsplashes that's all that's coming out. So guys, please give me a call. I'd love to represent you, whether you're a seller or a buyer. 20 years of experience, tons of knowledge, unbelievable expertise, and the right representation awaits you. So definitely give me a call. Maria Kafetzis, Douglas Elliman Real Estate. Thank you. And remember to like this video and subscribe.